Welcome back for another book review. Today we are talking about this one. So this is Llewellyn's Little Book of Unicorns by Angela A. Wicks. So this is not necessarily part of a series, but it kind of is. So the series is Llewellyn's Little Book of Blank. They aren't related like the Sabbath Essentials were, where they were kind of the same format, and then each one was just like a different author usually. Some were like overlaps, but some were different and only did one. So these books range from unicorns to dragons. I know there's a couple that I'm waiting for like October where it's like Little Book of Halloween and Little Book of like the Day of the Dead. Like there's a few I'm waiting to read that I'm excited for, but this was one that I was like scrolling through the library list of like what books do I want to buy, or not buy, but rent next. And I was like, you know what? Let's just see. Because like, I'm gonna be really honest, I've never thought about having unicorns as part of my practice. That was a little bit out there even for me. And like, I literally have a coffin bookcase behind me that I have built with my grandpa, and I've painted it black, wearing black and gray. Like, I dyed my hair black. I'm not exactly unicorn material, to say the least. But I was like, you know what? Whatever. I've read books on the Fae. I don't do much with them. I've read books on a variety of things that I typically, like, it might not be my thing, but I'll read through it. This book was one of those where initially I was like, this is probably not my thing. And like immediately getting this book, seeing it on like the hold section at the library was like, oh my God. Like sometimes the shadows just pop up unexpectedly and you're just like, whoa, that's a lot right now. And they're just spontaneous. And this book had one of those because it is a very stereotypical little girly book. Like the font, the design, I don't think the camera's picking it up, but it gives the illusion of a little bit of like the glittery pink to it. It's not actually, but the way the cover's designed at quick glance, that's how you're gonna see it. And it's just like, I feel so awkward and embarrassed checking out a neon pink book dressed all in black with a Nightmare Before Christmas backpack and like walking in there and you're like, yep, I'm totally getting a book on unicorns right now. The reality is absolutely nobody cared. Nobody even noticed what I'm doing. And like the strange thing is any other book I wouldn't really care. If they saw me with like the books that have witchcraft really heavily on the front and look very witchy, like, and somebody came up to me and was like, what are you reading? I would have absolutely zero problem being like, well, so witchcraft is a religion and a spirituality and blah, blah, blah. But somehow a book on unicorns that's pink was like the thing that like, I was just sitting there like, oh my God, this is like one of the most embarrassing books I've ever rented from a library ever. Wow. And it was just like, it's weird because like, it was a lot of shadow work that I was not anticipating from picking up a stupid book. But like, truly, the message of the book, it kind of was like, oh, well, fine. Because again, I say all of this to say I did not anticipate thoroughly enjoying this book. And I ended up really contemplating this book a lot. Like, it was actually one of, it's not like a 5-star, it's definitely still in the 4-star category because there are parts that I don't love about this book. And a lot of people have said that it's not exactly what they wanted it to be. And I'm in that band camp too. It wasn't exactly what I wanted. But the thing is, this book got me thinking a lot on the topic. And honestly, a lot of it comes from the very beginning of the book, where it's more just kind of explaining, like, what would a unicorn mean? And the way that I decided to look at it after reading through this and pondering it for a few days is that it's more of like the same way we look at like the animal spirit guides and things, where you're not necessarily like worshiping every single fox that comes down your path or every single dog that you're like, oh my God, it's a sign, blah, I got to see it in the real world. Sometimes that happens, but for the most part, when we're talking about working with your spirit guides in the animal form, like it's more so the attributes that we've associated with those animals. And that's kind of how I was viewing a unicorn. And like, I did additional research outside of this book, and it was a lot of things that like lined up. And it was like, oh, maybe that's something to actually like look into. And again, this book didn't have a lot for that, to be honest, in that realm, which is a bummer. That's kind of where I was hoping it was gonna go, because I'm curious too on the dragon book if it's gonna be like that, because there is more of like a dragon path and like a dragon community opposed to unicorns. And like one part of this is that it does fall into mythological categories, but I agreed with the author. She's like, for the longest time, I didn't know that narwhals were real. I thought they were the same category as a unicorn, and like, to be honest, same. There are so many things that actually exist in the world, and you're like, a horse with a horn is the one that's not real? Really? Because like, I had the same thing. I honestly thought, like, when I used to watch Elf around like Christmas time, that the narwhal was just another mythical creature, and then like at some point I learned that no, it's an actual thing, and you're like, really? That thing is real. That actually exists. But a horse with a horn doesn't. Okay. And so like when she mentioned that, I was like, yes. And the nice thing about this author, and is something that like I totally like connected with, is that she has chronic illnesses. And she deals with a lot of the stuff where it's a long-term thing. It affects you mentally, emotionally, physically. And as somebody who also has things that constantly affect me, I have like a bleeding disorder. Like, for example, just, okay, if bruises scare you, look away for a second. Okay, do you see this gnarly bruise going on right here? I have no idea what I did. Like, I don't remember walking into anything. I don't remember, like, hubby laying on this arm and, like, crushing my arm. He usually is on this side. And it's like, what did I do? And so, like, I do have to be overly cautious because of the bleeding disorder. That gnarly bruise is from I don't even know what. Like, I can't do so many things, and I do have to monitor that to be like, okay, do I actually have to take my meds? Because if so, that is like a whole process, because you have to do intravenous and it's just a pain in the butt. But anyway, so reading a book with an author that's talking about all of the joys of having a chronic illness. I don't think she ever says what she has, but like, it doesn't really matter. There's so many things where if it affects you on a day-to-day basis, and it's something that always has to weigh heavily on your mind, you don't get the choice to not think about it. And then she also talks about like the mental side that comes with it, because when you have certain like physical ailments, inevitably it does mess up your mental mind, because like it sucks to not be normal and like to have to think about things or have limitations. Like, it is just a nice little package that's handed to you when you also have physical problems. Typically you're gonna have mental ones too, like anxiety and depression and like feeling isolated. So like there's just a lot of things that the author talked about that it was like, huh. And then always tying it back to the topic of a unicorn. It was weird, and it sounds so strange, but if you think about it more as like a state of mind, because that's kind of how it was, is that the unicorn energy in this book is really a state of mind. It's not necessarily even the same way we would look at like the totem animal, spirit guide, power animal. I know some of those are like kind of close to practice terms, but they've also been used for so long in the craft too. But nowadays we just call it a spirit animal. But it's kind of like that, but kind of not. And it's, again, just kind of like a metaphorical thing of the unicorn. So it's like tying it to different things, which includes like how to deal with, like, again, feeling isolated, feeling alone. How do you mentally kind of analyze the situation to use the energy of the unicorn? And it's just one of those, like, as you even, even trying to explain it, it sounds silly, but like, that's kind of the thing. Unicorns are in fact silly creatures. And like, they represent so many different things, and it's just interesting to talk about how it's like the unicorns are like hidden and like they're sometimes hard to find, but they also represent like happiness. And so if you're like going through depression, you might need to be looking for that unicorn in your life and to spark your joy, which is what unicorns are often associated with, and finding your passions, and like not necessarily to like make it a career, but just little things that make you happy. And like just little things, and it was like, huh, like it got me thinking a lot. There's a lot of this book that like didn't feel like it mattered at all to me, and like that's not a bad thing, but it was just like, okay, whatever, 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 whatever. Because it was like the standard witchy book content. So that was kind of a bummer. Because it's like, oh, but here's explaining the chakras like 2 or 3 times. And you're like, cool. And like talking about some random crystals that are really popular. Cool. Like just little stuff like that where you're like, whatever. But like, other than that, like there was a lot of the exercises were kind of really geared to like her specific way of looking at the unicorn thing. And again, it's somewhere between like, just like a vibe basically, and like a metaphor, an archetype thing. Again, it was just kind of almost like just a mindset of like looking for like the little things in life. Like one of her examples was like spotting certain kinds of birds or a butterfly or whatever and looking for like the synchronicities, and it's like cool, but I feel like there could be like a little bit, maybe more, maybe, I don't know. It felt like it was like not quite everything I wanted it to be, but I also don't know exactly what it was missing that I would have wanted more of. Because it was just like, it didn't do what I wanted it to do, but like it got me thinking on the topic a lot. And like to the point that I was like looking it up all the time for the past few days. I've been looking up like all sorts of stuff, and it was like, this is kind of fun. And like went down a total shadow work journey over this book that was like, I didn't expect that from this book. I really had low expectations. So like it definitely fulfilled that and then some. Was it like life-changing? Not necessarily, but it did make me think a lot on the topic that I never would have considered. And like the author is really good. I like her writing style. I do hope she has other books out there. She is like an editor for Llewellyn and like helps with books, but like her writing was actually really good. So I'm like, I hope you do more, because like I liked her writing. I liked hearing her stories throughout it. But again, it was just like the only thing that kind of drew me back was like it didn't exactly meet my expectation, and I wasn't the only one. So I know that like it wasn't like just me being like, well, I don't know, like other people had that experience too. And that also like, again, kind of your basic stuff was included a lot that I was like, this feels kind of weird, but like whatever. So anyways, like it kind of felt like it was necessary, like telling you which crystals, but also it was just like the crystal meanings in general, not necessarily completely tying it just to, anyways. I say that as I'm writing my death book, and like when I mention herbs and crystals, I am only mentioning how it's related to the specific thing that we're doing, and in the context of what we're doing, I don't mention the other things. So like, I don't know if it's just like a personal bias on that front of like, well, why are you mentioning all this like unnecessary stuff? Just talk about it and be done. I don't know. But anyways, those are my thoughts on Llewellyn's Little Book of Unicorns. I would love to hear yours. If you work with the unicorn vibe, energy thing, spirit guide, whatever, I would love to hear from you, because like, I'm very intrigued on the topic, because it's like, huh. So anyways, I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. Huge thank you to my patrons. I'll have their names here on the screen. If you'd like to support me and get access to exclusive content, it is patreon.com/nightwillowcrafts. Make sure to like and subscribe. I post every single day. And until next time, thank you so much for watching, and blessed be.